So here I will be going over chapter 15 in the IGCSE biology book, which is a short chapter about drugs. So I will be going over chapter 15 here in the book. And be aware, as often there's a lot we don't cover. There's many different drugs, both for medical and for more recreational use we're not touching on. So it's just scratching the surface. Also, this video is made for my IGCSE biology class. It's free for use. I don't gain anything from this, but if you can use it, you use it in your teaching or otherwise, just be free to use it. Any mistakes here are mine and mine alone, and yeah. So, what is a drug? Well, according to Cambridge, the definition is a drug is any substance taken into the body that modifies or affects a chemical reaction in the body. This might sound like boring, but in reality it covers a whole lot. When we drink alcohol, it affects a lot of things in our body. If we take a painkiller, it goes in and affects specific sites on our cell membranes. So, and it's not a modern thing. We know from ancient writing that people have been using different kind of herbal medicine for a long time. Willow bark, for example, is a great painkiller and can be used for reducing fever. Other kind of natural ingredients has been used against, bad stomach, pain, other issues, and we know that some of them work. The difference is in modern medicine, we also know why they work, and we know what they affect on the cell membrane, what tissue they work on, and what chemical reactions they modify. So modern medical drugs is a miracle. They make us live longer, and diseases that would have killed us easily 200 to 300 years ago can now be treated. So it is a miracle that we now have medication that works against, pneumonia, cancer, the plague, or the other diseases that are very hard on us humans. But there are also side effects. Most drugs come with a side effect, and many drugs can both be used and misused, as we'll look on in the next slides. So just by saying the word drugs, we often think about either stuff going on in a hospital or, people taking drugs to a party. But in a daily life, drugs can often be a part of it. I think many people have tried taking paracetamol or other low-grade painkillers if they have a headache or if they have a slight injury, and they can help you go through the day. I know I would be a very bad teacher if I didn't get some caffeine from my coffee in the morning. It improves my alertness and makes me a decent human. And I think many people, we just had New Year's parties, had some alcohol to help them loosen up their inhibitions and have a good night. So there are many different things here that also are, by definition, a drug that people use in their daily life. If I were to point to one drug that has made the biggest difference, it is antibiotics. And it's really hard to imagine how different our world was before antibiotics. 100 years ago, getting an infected wound could kill you. And not just weak persons. People with a strong immune defense could still be overwhelmed by gas gangrene or an infection in wounds. And that was what killed most people in warfare as well. Getting infected wounds would lead to either limbs being amputated or people dying of what was called the fever. But when penicillin was discovered, it was a game changer. The fungus penicillin makes penicillin, and penicillin is a drug that works on bacteria. They don't work on us, but on the bacteria they stop the growth of their cell walls. This makes them very, very good at killing bacteria. This has made a huge impact on our health system, and many diseases that used to be dangerous can now be treated with a shot of antibiotics. As with everything else, there is a side effect, and that is using too many antibiotics both on us and perhaps even more important on our farm animals will lead to resistant strains of bacteria growing and being more and more common. So we are now seeing more and more bacteria who are resistant to the antibiotics we need to use in our hospitals to treat sick people. Antibiotics also kill the good bacteria we have in our gut. So it's important not just to take antibiotics anytime you feel sick, because the side effect of losing, your bacterial gut health is a huge thing. Lastly, antibiotics only work against bacteria. Viruses don't have a cell wall, so they won't be affected by antibiotics, and to treat a viral infection, you need specific antiviral drugs. Opioids are a type of medicine that originally came from the poppy plant, but today they can also be made in the lab. These is drugs like morphine, oxycodone, heroin. And they are a very powerful painkiller, and again they can be used in a good and a bad way. As a painkiller they are great because they work fast, and if you are a first responder and you come out to someone who's been in a bad accident, keeping them free from pain makes it much easier to rescue them. That's also why soldiers on the battlefield, they carry morphine in their kit, because if you need to treat a gunshot wound or something else, morphine is very effective at keeping people from screaming in pain and being able to rescue them to get them to further medical attention. The different opioids, they work on the endorphin receptors in the brain, which will shut down the pain signals, but they'll also go in and work as a downer. It will slow your heart rate, it will dull pain, and in many people it will give a sense of euphoria, something that people describe as being a very, very pleasant feeling. That is why in the form of heroin or also in the form of different prescription drugs, this can lead to abuse because it is highly addictive. So once people get hooked on morphine, heroin, or the different kind of synthetic morphine we especially see in the United States, addiction can be very hard to beat, and we see people's life getting destroyed. So like antibiotics can be used for good but have a side effect, we have the same thing here with opioids. They are a very, very good painkiller, and if used for a short time, for people with very large amount of pain, it's good. If used for a long time, it leads to a lot of health issues and problems. And here we just see a few data a few years ago on how this opioid epidemic we see in the United States are affecting people. So there is a lot of people who have gotten addicted to painkillers. Again, for a short time use, painkillers are great, but once you get addicted to them, they will lead to a lower quality of life, and people tend to die from overdoses, and people tend to commit crime to cover the cost for the drug use. So opioids are a huge problem worldwide, and it's not something that seems to be going away soon. One of the oldest known drugs, even mentioned in the Bible, is alcohol. I think you all remember the story of Jesus making water to wine. So already 2,000 years ago, alcohol was a pretty big part of our culture. And alcohol, like everything else we talk about here, can be either used or abused. The picture you see here is an old picture of me enjoying a good beer and some sausage in the Alps. And used in social situations, alcohol can be perfectly fine. But like many other things, it will have side effects if used too often or too much. Alcohol is a special drug compared to both the opioids we talked about and caffeine and other drugs. Is most drugs affect a specific receptor on a cell membrane. So opioids go in and affect a receptor in the brain. Caffeine hits another one, nicotine hits a third one, but alcohol works more as a generalized kind of dulling the central nervous system. So when we drink alcohol, it will go in and relax our central nervous system, and that removes inhibitions. That means you might be more likely to dance, talk to people you normally wouldn't talk to, and just be in a more relaxed mood. Alcohol gets absorbed over the stomach, takes 20 to 30 minutes depending on how much food you have in the stomach, and then the liver will break it down. And how long it'll take for the liver to break it down depends on who you are, how big you are, but it takes quite some time for alcohol to be broken down by the liver. Small amount of alcohol is not harmful, but in larger doses or drinking often, it can lead to harmful effects for the body. One effect is accidents, both in traffic and in the workplace. When we drink alcohol, our reaction time gets slower, and if you're operating heavy machinery or driving a car, having a slower reaction time is a bad thing. Also, we know there's a link between alcohol and violence, because removing the inhibitions will make some people more likely to resort to violence. So there is some social effects of alcohol and some health-like effects from accidents. A large intake of alcohol can lead to death. And that, by a large intake, we mean quite a large intake. And that can either come from people throwing up while they're sleeping and then suffocating in their own vomit, or in really, really large doses, you can see a paralysis of the muscle responsible for breathing. The side effect we see more often is that drinking often and in large amount can lead to alcoholism and addiction. We don't know why some people get addicted easily to alcohol and other people don't. Some people can drink quite often and have no addiction, and other people can quickly get an addiction to alcohol. But what we do know is that if people are addicted to alcohol, it's a very hard habit to beat. Alcohol damages all organ systems in the body, but the main damage happens to our liver and our brain. The liver breaks down the alcohol, and this is toxic to the liver. So if our liver pretty much every day has to break down alcohol, it will end up damaging the liver, and in worst case we can get so bad liver damage that the only way for treating it is a liver transplant. Alcohol also affects our central nervous system, and it will over time affect how our brain works. But alcohol also damages pretty much every other organ system in the body. It leads to lower muscle strength, it leads to worse sleep, it leads to men having problems perhaps with their sexual functions. So there are many different ways that alcohol in large amount will damage us, and we also know that it can lead to a lot of different types of cancer. So again, like all the other things we talk about, there is a use and a misuse, and misuse of alcohol is on a worldwide scale a huge and important problem. Another drug that the Cambridge syllabus mentioned is anabolic steroids. Anabolic means something that stimulates tissue formation. So for example, if you've been working out and the body is repairing itself, that is tissue formation. Natural testosterone, the male sex hormone, tends to stimulate the anabolic response in the body. That is one of the reasons why males, like in general, tend to have a larger muscle mass than females. And it was discovered in the 50s and 60s that injecting extra testosterone in the body led to increase in muscle size and muscle power. In many different types of sports, this would be a huge advantage, Olympic weightlifting being one, but in many sports where you depend on muscle and power, getting stronger muscles and getting muscle growth faster has been a huge game changer. But like everything else, there are side effects, and they can be huge. And the side effects can go from, loss of hair and skin issues, which is mainly, superficial and stuff you can maybe learn to live with, but also infertility and problems with the heart and liver, which can tend to be a problem for life and lead to a reduced quality of life, and even in some cases death. Females will also see a change in their voice from the male sex hormones. It will get deeper, and some people see issues with both aggression and depression because hormones affect our mood. In most sports, you test for anabolic steroids, and getting caught with them will lead to people being banned, but it's still a huge thing both in sports and in training just for, looking good in the gym. So how much effect does anabolic steroids have? Well, quite a lot. On the two pictures to the left, we see how big trained muscular men looked before steroids were invented. We have George Hackensmith, the Russian Lion, and Steve Reeves. And both of these were seen as peak human performance in a time before anabolic steroids. And I think most people would agree they look strong and muscular. But if you compare them to Ronnie Coleman and Big Ramy, we see on the picture on the right, there is a total different level of muscularity that can be achieved with anabolic steroids. And many people who live by social media, by selling stuff on Instagram and YouTube, many people, they use anabolic steroids to get the body they want to promote themselves. And it has led to a change on how the male body is seen, that people grow up and seeing these huge action stars being super muscular, not realizing that it is almost impossible to attain that kind of muscularity without using chemical enhancements in the form of anabolic steroids. Now, with all the other drugs I talked about, I always said there was a positive and a negative side. Even anabolic steroids can be used in a positive way if you have people who have lost a lot of muscle mass due to disease or injury. But the one we're getting to now, tobacco, really is without any truly positive side effects. The active drug in tobacco is nicotine, and nicotine is a stimulant that affects alertness. So people taking nicotine or smoking will feel more alert, more sharp. It also decreases appetite. And it is a highly addictive drug, especially in quick-acting forms, as we see in tobacco smoke. Nicotine is very addictive to the brain, and if you are addicted to it, not having nicotine will make you depressed and can even make you feel almost sick. Nicotine in itself can damage the circulatory system by making blood vessels more narrow and thereby increasing blood pressure. But that is perhaps one of the smallest effects we have on smoking, because nicotine in itself is dangerous, but getting it in the form of tobacco smoke is really what makes it dangerous. When we light a cigarette or another pipe, cigar, whatever, when it burns, it releases carbon monoxide, and carbon monoxide binds to a hemoglobin and thereby makes the body transport less oxygen. So it simply makes our blood transport system less efficient having carbon monoxide in the system. So people who smoke a lot will go around with a low-grade carbon monoxide poisoning. Also, tar, which can be found in tobacco, can and will over time damage the tissue in the throat and the lung. And long-time smokers can end up what we call chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, which means that there is a non-reversible destruction of lung tissue. Here we see the difference between a healthy lung and a lung who has been damaged by tobacco smoke. In a healthy lung, we will see the bronchitis is open, while if it's been damaged by tobacco smoke, it will tend to be inflamed and covered in mucus, which means there's less space, you can get less air through. Also, we'll see a breakdown of the alveoles in the lung. They will lose elasticity, which means they get worse at expanding and compressing as we are breathing. And when they do that, the lung tissue becomes less effective. So people who end up with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease will have a problem just doing basic activity like walking up a stair. And in worst cases, people might need to have supplementary oxygen at all time just to live a normal life. So it is a huge effect on people's quality of life to have their lung destroyed by tobacco smoke. Other health issues from smoking is heart disease and cancer. When we take in nicotine and when we smoke, it raises the blood pressure, and having a high blood pressure for a long time is not healthy for the heart and will lead to an increased risk of heart damage. Smoking also increases the risk of blood clot, which can lead to strokes, and smoking is a leading cause of lung cancer. Chemicals in the smoke cause damage to the DNA in the thin lung tissue, and over time this can lead to cancer, which is very hard to treat. Another problem is that once you're addicted to smoking, quitting is very hard. Some people see effects by taking nicotine in the form of chewing gum and patches. That makes it easier for them to quit. Of course, the nicotine will still damage their health, but you don't get all the other chemicals you get from the tobacco smoke to damage the lungs. Last, smoking will in generally shorten a person's lifespan. 1 in 4 heavy smokers die before they're 65, and the average lifespan of heavy smokers is 13 years shorter than that of a non-smoker. So it means if you smoke a lot for a long time, you will probably die sooner, and the last years of your life will be less fun due to having lungs that don't work really well. So compared to other drugs we talk about here, smoking is, on a world scale, one that really harms a lot of people. And sometimes it's weird to think about how many things in our legal systems who are illegal, and yet smoking and alcohol, which are perhaps two of the more destructive drugs, are legal and is pretty much sold everywhere. But that is a question for another day. This was the stuff that Cambridge want to cover for the syllabus. Thank you for sticking with me and have a nice day.